Hello everyone, Owen Macaulay here, the host behind Creator in Conversation. And today's bonus episode, I'm going to tell you about that time I interviewed Stan Lee in 2014. And if you listen and watch today's episode, you'll also learn how you'll be able to download your own free digital comic book magazine as well, which features not only the interview in question, but also a couple of other short stories by Irish comic book creators, as well as interviews with other guests who were present at the Dublin Comic Con 2014. So, as just to go back a little bit with regards to this particular podcast, one of the objectives I had with it was for it to act as a repository for not just the interviews that I conduct exclusively for Creator and Conversation, but also various other interviews I had the opportunity to conduct throughout my career. I founded Light and Strike Comics back in 2011, but Light and Strike Comics only began print in 2012. So by 2014, I had less than 2 years' experience publishing comics, and I was still a college student myself at that particular time. Also, I didn't hold on to a smartphone. I didn't have a smartphone till far later into my 20s. So the idea of recording podcasts, video, audio, or otherwise didn't really appeal or was a consideration for me at that point in time. But as many listeners to Creator in Conversation have now learned, I've been posting previous interviews which I've hosted at Dublin Comic Con, at Malta Comic Con, at other conventions and shows I've been at. And the reason Creator in Conversation exists is because originally it was designed to be a series of in-person lectures, but unfortunately, we couldn't gain the traction for such events on campus. But when we opened it up online, we found a global audience there for us, which has been fantastic. So today's bonus episode features an interview which was conducted for print only. It was part of the Dublin Comic Con Magazine back in 2014. Great cover, illustrated, painted illustration by Eoin Roach. The idea for the magazine came about when Dublin Comic Con was still fairly new itself. It was probably only in its second year. It was out in the National Show Centre in Dublin, where they recently returned for the HorrorCon that they've begun running as well. And basically, with regards to the magazine, the idea was that it would act as a souvenir for attendees. They could get the back of it signed by some of the guests, and it would feature original short stories and interviews as well with the guests. It was a nice little package to work on. As part of this, I decided to reach out to Stan Lee because it's now a bigger name, and my understanding at this point in time was that Stan was planning to do his last ever UK appearance. I believe subsequently there were other appearances, but at this particular juncture in time in 2014, my understanding was that his wife Joan was originally from the UK. They had family there. They were going to go back and visit. And yeah, it was at the London Film and Comic Con, huge event. So I had looked up Stan Lee's office online, and that's mainly how I find most of my contacts. People ask, how do you connect with such and such? Usually it's just casting a wide net, looking up people's contact information, finding the appropriate representatives, and from there, just see what's feasible and what's possible. So at the time, I believe Stan was with Pow Entertainment, Pioneers Wonderment. So we connected with them, asked them if it'd be possible to set up an interview. Through back and forth, I was like, look, I'm not looking for an extensive phone call or anything like that. Simple written correspondence would suffice for the purpose of the magazine. And that seemed viable on their end. So I'd write up my questions in an email format, send it over to Stan's representative, his PA or whoever was handling his affairs at the time. And then Stan would, at this juncture in time, my understanding was his eyesight wasn't the best. So he would type his correspondence back as a Word document, but the font size would be huge. It'd be like the opening scroll to Star Wars. That would be sent back to you. But I appreciate that because it let me know authentically it was Stan Lee who was actually corresponding with me and not through a third party intermediary as well. So what we ended up doing was gathering all this information, which is basically just a Word document, and compile it into a magazine style interview. My colleague Kevin Weldon helped to comprise the entirety of the actual PDF of the magazine, which I believe he did in InDesign. And Robert Carey did a portrait illustration of Stan Lee as well, which you'll see in just a moment. And Cormac Hughes also did original artwork, which we packaged with Robert Carey's illustration and sent it to Stan along with a copy of the magazine itself. And then at the London Film and Comic Con, which happened, I went over with Carl Walsh, one of the co-organisers of Dublin Comic Con, and from there we were able to actually physically meet Stan and get the photo opportunity, which was nice also. So this interview was conducted back in 2014 via this written correspondence, and it was just my opportunity to ask a couple of questions to Stan Lee. At this point in time, I was very inexperienced, in terms of just entering the comic book industry. I wasn't pursuing comic books academically at the time. I wasn't even a teacher at this juncture in my career. I was still very much a student, so it was a completely different own at this point in time. But I do really appreciate the opportunity. And at the show itself, Stan was very spry, very engaging with the fans as well, and it was just a good time all round. So I thought today would be a fun opportunity to share with you guys this recollection of mine from interviewing Stan Lee back in 2014. So if you go to lightningstrikecomics.com, you'll see the website and homepage will appear on screen in just a moment. This is the online store that's used for pretty much everything that I sell. I do online. Even if I with TASQ Art, when we sell classes, we do everything through the online shop, which you can find through the shop button here. But if you go to the homepage and scroll down, you'll find the actual icon for Dublin Comic Con right here. So if you press onto this one, it will take you to the anthologies that we used to do and still do. We'll currently have up to volume 10. You can actually access volume 9, but if you click on the Dublin Comic Con magazine icon here from 2014, it will take you to a PDF, and you'll be able to access the entirety of the magazine itself. So as I mentioned, you'll see original short stories by leading Irish comic creators from the time. You'll also be able to find interviews with the guests such as Alan Grant, Ian Churchill, Kevin Conroy, and of course Stan Lee. And just quickly onto the cover as well, great illustration by Oisin Roach, who did this through digital painting, I believe, and the actual formatting of the magazine as well was done by Kevin Weldon. I believe he did it in InDesign also. So if we just skip ahead to page 26, you'll see the portrait illustration by Rob Carey. And if we click onto the next page, you'll actually find the interview itself, which, as I was mentioning, was a very quick and concise interview as well. So I'm just going to stick this on present mode as well, so it'll be clear for everyone watching at home. And for our audio audience, I'll just read out. So back when I did this interview, like I was still very new to the comic book industry. I was a long-term fan, hadn't done much serious research into the academia side or the creator's history. Everyone knew who Stan Lee was because he was a constant appearance on the MCU films as well. So my intro to this was just Stan Lee is a comic book legend, having created some of the most recognizable characters in the industry, from Spider-Man to the X-Men. Dublin Comic Con was fortunate to get a chance to do a quick Q&A with the man himself. Now, of course, if I was to go back and do a lot more, in-depth journalism onto this, I would definitely emphasized his co-creator, of course, particularly with the upcoming Steve Ditko documentary we're working on, and of course Jack Kirby's immeasurable contributions as well to the MCU. But this is mainly just a very concise introduction. As I said, I was still very new professionally to the industry at the time, with barely 2 years experience publishing comics. So we get into the main body of the interview now. My first question to Stan was, what is the biggest change that you've noticed in the industry since you began your career? Stan's response was, the biggest, most incredible change has been the fact that due to the amazing success of this Marvel superhero movies, both adults and young people throughout the world have now become new comic book readers and fans. So again, Stan at this point was really emphasizing the explosion at the MCU, which Iron Man would have came out in about 2008, the same year The Dark Knight came out as well, and that saw an influx of new readers and audience to the comic book world. My next question was, you've appeared in many cameos across the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How does it feel to be on the set of a film based on your work? Stan's response was, "It feels just great. I have the chance to meet and speak with the actors, director, and producer of the movie, and it's tremendously gratifying to realize so much talent and effort goes into a project which is based on my story." My next question was, what would your dream project be apart from creating an amazing Irish superhero team, of course? And Stan says, "I think I've already created my dream project or projects, but don't be surprised if you see a new Irish superhero coming along in the future." So it's good to get some of that Stanley tongue-in-cheek banter as well, which he was always renowned for. And then my final question was actually, this was really interesting, the response that I got back. I asked, what advice would you give to aspiring writers that you wish you had when you started your career? And Stan responds with, strangely enough, I never really wished for any advice when I started in comics. I just read what other writers had written and decided to write the same way or even better if I could. The only advice I can think of is, whatever you intend to do with your chosen career, study the work of those who have been the most successful in that career and try to figure out what made their work successful. Then try to do what they did, only make yours even better if you can. And what was interesting about that response for me, because it's advice I often reshare to a lot of my students, not just the comic book students, but in any field that I teach, is it is a cornerstone piece of advice. And it may sound like a no-brainer to a lot of people going, well, of course, see what else is happening. But you'd be surprised by how many new uprising talent in any particular industry want to break the mold. But before you do that, it's important to understand, well, first, how is the mold made? Like, what's the usual standard operating procedure? What is the usual markers of success? So before we go about breaking new ground and through the innovation, have your ideas, of course, but also look to see what others are doing and how does that work for them? And then how can your new idea or contribution fit in and elevate that even further and change the game? Because that pretty much was what Marvel did in the 60s. Starting with Fantastic Four, they were looking at the superhero genre and they basically threw out the rule book. They realized the family unit was important, real life struggle, emphasis, and drama. But the Fantastic Four #1 didn't even have costumes or HQ or any of that. It was much more refined in its approach, and it was a dramatic departure in many ways from what the tip was expected from a typical superhero story. So that advice, although it may seem very, not revealing much, very much to the point, when you actually reflect on it, there's many layers and a lot to take in from it. And then, of course, I conclude the interview with thank you very much for your time. And on behalf of Dublin Comic Con, we wish you all the best with your future projects. And Stan ends with, and I wish the Dublin Comic Con the greatest success. Excelsior, Stan Lee. So that was a great short little interview. I was delighted to have the opportunity to speak with Stan very briefly and be able to capture that. And I just thought it'd be a fun story to share while we're in between seasons here on the podcast for Creator in Conversation. If this is your first time checking out the channel, you can find many more live interactive interviews with various leading industry guests and experts from our previous 2 seasons of the podcast. Over 70 episodes now available to watch on YouTube or to stream on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoy our content, please consider liking and subscribing to help grow the channel. That means a great deal. If you would like to see more of that magazine, which I read from, again, if you visit lightningstrikecomics.com, you'll be able to download that as well. And if you just rewind, you'll be able to find the exact icon to press and select in order to download the PDF and read in full. We'll be back again very shortly with more content, and we're coming very close to announcing and releasing the new season of Creator in Conversation. Until next time, thank you very much for watching, and Creator in Conversation is a copyright production of Macaulay Consultancy 2026.